Thanks everybody for showing up. We'll just give it a few more, or I guess we should just start on time. I'll be prompt. Okay, so my name is Terry Lowry, and okay, hold on. There's some people joining us. So should I admit them, or Seth, are you going to admit them? Okay, looks like he's admitting them.
I will admit them. Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, that's great. Looks like there's a chat too.
How many are we expecting?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what that class or.
Well, my class is about 11 or 12 students, so at least them, and then us. But it's open to the entire campus. But I know that you spoke to Gonzalo. He's teaching tonight, so he won't attend, but he'll watch the recording after. Which does remind me, I'm supposed to read this. This lecture will be recorded for archival purposes. All audience members, cameras, and microphones will be automatically turned off/muted for the duration of the lecture until the Q&A portion of this lecture, which will open at 8 p.m. Central Time. The chat section is open during the lecture for tech support questions and audience comments, but questions for the artist will not be prompted until the Q&A portion of the lecture. You may ask questions during the Q&A through video/microphone or via chat, which will be read by this evening's moderator, which is me. And I'm Terry Lowry. I teach web design at the Masters of Arts in Graphic and Web Design at MCAD, which you guys are all attending. And I am happy and excited to introduce Miss Sheryl D. Miller, who is an author, designer, and theologian.
Yep.
Okay. Who is best known for her diversity, equity, and inclusion advocacy for Black graphic designers in the industry and marketplace. Her response to the Black Lives Movement, appearing in a 4-part series commissioned by Print Magazine. Parts 1, 2, and 3 are already published, and part 4, correct me if I'm wrong, Sheryl, is going to be released this Thursday.
Yes, I've already approved the manuscript. The editor sent it back, and the editor said, "Are we ready to go?" And I said, "Push the button." So. Yeah, it's going to be an exciting one. So if you don't read any of my work at all, you must, I guarantee you must read Thursday. You have to. Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. I mean, and this is a follow-up to the original article that you wrote in 1987.
I've written for print 1987, 2016. And so it's a trilogy, with the last being a 4-part series.
They had to give you 4 spots because they had to let you finish.
Well, yeah, they contracted 1,500 words with me and paid me for 1,500 words, and I submitted 14,000. And so everyone read it, and the editor came back and said, "We're not touching this. We're going to break it up into 4 parts." And each one gets a little edgy. So we've been kind of mounting. So I guarantee you a remarkable ending. It brings closure for me and should help the BIPOC community and designers of color globally around the world. I have some very interesting findings that should take care and answer a lot of questions. So Thursday, if you're not familiar with my work or you don't want to catch up, all of the articles are online, all the way back for 1987. There are links for all of it. If you don't have the strength of the patience to read the whole journey, read Thursday.
Awesome. Okay, I think I'm going to open the PowerPoint now, if that's okay.
Sure.
And should I just click on the video? That'll do a more thorough introduction.
Yeah, sure. What we're doing tonight is I want to thank everyone from MCAD and everyone who's gathered with us tonight. Please sit back and enjoy a very unique graphic design story of my career, and just take notes, make sure every question is valid. Just ask. I'm known to be a straight shooter, so put your seatbelt on. All right. We're going to have a survey. This lecture is called Designing in the Dark. And all of my work, 50 boxes, 50 years of my career and my life as a visual artist. I'm a lifetime legacy visual artist. I've been doing this since I was 3, believe it or not. Stanford University came across country. I live in Connecticut, and the presentation talks about how they came and helped to establish the Sheryl Miller collection at Stanford. So with that, Terry's going to start us off with an explanation from Stanford why they came across country for my work. And then we're going to survey the work and show it to you. Okay, Terry, you can click.
You don't see the video?
No, not yet.
Hold on a second, please. Do we see it now?
No.
No, we see the presenter mode right now.
Hmm. Do you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes, we see it now.
Okay.
If you want to, yeah, full screen.
Sorry about that.
The audio is not coming through very well. Can we unshare and then make sure that the box underneath before you screen shared send computer audio is ticked? So we might have to unshare and then reshare with that.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Oh, it did get turned off.
Okay. We should be good after that.
Apologies to everybody. Technical. Okay, let's start this over. Let me know if the audio.
It's taken me a few years to get the John S. Knight Fellows into the library for a library workshop. So this year was the first year that we actually did an information session with.
We could hear it, but I could not see it.
You see it?
Yes, we see it.
The Fellows. But I was thrilled because the Fellows are well known for being really inquisitive and digging up really interesting questions, and so I was excited for their questions. And at the end of the class, there were a few questions, and this was one of them.
I raised my hand and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for this really long title. And actually I have the title here. I can never remember it because it's long, but it's good. So the title of her thesis was Transcending the Problem of the Black Graphic Designer to Success in the Marketplace by Sheryl Miller.
First thing I did was look in the databases that we have for PhD and master's theses, and it wasn't in there. And so I knew that was going to require a little more digging around, and so exchange of email is typical. And then I eventually tracked it down by by finding the journal article that mentions it, and then tracking it down to Pratt Institute, contacting Pratt and asking them to do an interlibrary loan of the thesis, which they did, and then, you know, it was right before the winter break, so it's like, okay, my work is done here, and then the question comes up, can I share this with my readers group? And so that requires copyright permissions from the author. So the next step would normally be for me to say to the researcher, you should just inquire from the author if you can get copyright. But because I thought wow, a whole readers group of 20 people, they want to read this? This must be really important work. And let me see if I can do something, put it in the SDR, the Stanford Digital Repository, so that others can use it, and future researchers beyond this group of 20.
That was the promising bit, was that, you know, this thing is still around and it's accessible, you know, but I would have to go, you know, all the way to New York, you know, to figure that out. And, you know, I don't have those kinds of funds. I'm on a fellowship. So I ran into a wall, and, you know, that was the barrier between me and this thesis, you know, but the experience of being able to work with Stanford Library and to have such a great resource in the library, and for Regina to not only, you know, take on the work of getting me access to this particular thesis, but it would eventually unfold into an entire collection of Sheryl Miller, which is even more exciting.
And so that's what I did. I tracked down Sheryl Miller. Through the conversations with her, I could tell that there was more to her work than just the thesis, that there was more there, that she had a lot more to share. And so, you know, the discussion just kind of went on from there, and she described the body of the work and the complexity of her own personal identity journey as a woman of color, mixed race, multi-ethnic background, and amassing some really, really important clients like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, the Black Caucus. And so all of those clients really blossomed from her tenacity and drive.
It's great for Regina to have been able to go to her house and, you know, spend time with her and, you know, pull, you know, work off of her own shelves and talk deeply about, you know, these different various contributions that she's made, these wonderful clients that she's had, and so, yeah, it's great to also sort of be a fly on the wall, like, wow, this is happening, you know, and I'm just like eating it up the whole time, and then, you know, for that hand raise to lead to such a bigger thing, I think is just amazing. I can't even, I'm still wrestling with the idea that, you know, I had a hand in this, and all I did was kind of raise my hand.
Again, thank you. Please enjoy. May it prosper the next young designer, and whatever you do, keep on grid.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, that's the beginning of how Stanford came across country to get my professional collection, which is more than my portfolio. And we're going to go through a survey of what's in the collection. And so with that, I'm going to give Terry back to switch, and I'll narrate behind each one. And again, I thank you for, you know, allowing me to come and share with you this evening, and hopefully it will inspire you, and I'll answer questions for you. It's been an interesting journey, to say the least.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. My business is in New York, Cheryl D. Miller Design New York, and a lot of people ask me about how did I brand the studio. I didn't. You guys have branded it for me. Okay, I just did the work, and I say you guys have branded me. Is that, you know, when people write about me, or you know, I'm honored. I've had a knack of winning awards, and so promos and language on the awards and things have given me the brand. They've identified what I did. Okay, and so really the corporate communications firm that defined the civil rights era, storytelling of a socially disenfranchised, marginalized community. I mean, I didn't know I was doing that, but that's exactly what I was doing: social impact, graphic design, and corporate communications. So there is a genre now, and pedagogy, and that's what I was doing, and that's what I was known for. Okay, you can go. So the collection it includes my memoir research, all of my manuscripts, article writings, you name it, journals, Rolodex, and all of the business documents, the letters, everything that is reflective of the backstory of a 20-year collection, 1974 to 1994, of corporate communications design firm that, for my clients in my studio, that included all the advocacy writings, everything that Regina wanted my work for 5 schools, okay, which is really, I couldn't believe that Stanford wanted my archives for 5 schools. And the 5 schools are political studies, American history, feminist studies, anthropology, and design. And, as we go along, I'll talk about why my work would be valuable for future scholars for 5 schools. That's really unbelievable. And the least of it is design. Next slide. I really have had the opportunity to go to many of the main art schools on the East Coast. And I graduated, I have a master's from Pratt. My BFA is from Maryland, is from MICA. I started Rhode Island School of Design freshman foundation, and 2 weeks before I was to start my sophomore year, my father passed away. And I was heading back to Providence, and he passed away. And so I didn't want to leave. I'm from Washington, D.C. I didn't want to leave my mother. I have a younger brother, and she was widowed early. My father died when he was 44. And the schools got together, and I never went back to Providence. Baltimore and MICA received me. I pivoted very quickly, and so I finished at MICA. I had a very interesting journey while I was servicing New York. Union Theological became my client, and I found myself doing theological studies, which is not Bible college, all right? And so I got exposed to writing history and scholarship and liberation theologies and what they call systematic theology. And so this was an opportunity to do some fine tuning, which really I could not do. My advocacy or writing, I have to admit and to say that design alone did not give me the sharpness of tools to do the kind of advocacy and trade writing. I really picked up some incredible skills in grad school again at Union. So I have a Master of Divinity, which really its application. I have served as Protestant clergy, but the net take of it is it really gave me what I was needed to do liberation theology, systematic work, where you're correcting injustices and documenting history and scholarship. I have been further trained. So it's been an interesting journey, and the school is up at Columbia University in New York, and they were my client. I was designing publications, and next thing you know, I was studying. Next. I am authentic. I am an authentic BIPOC, and I say that because I love the young scholars. They have come up with a way to give genre and define my family. Okay, it's perfect for me. And I have a very, very, very unique, I am the original BIPOC mid-century designer. I have an interesting family heritage, both maternal and paternal. And it all had a struggle in my head and in my world and in my life, just squeezing it into being African American. But I am BIPOC, and I am proud to walk with the young scholars because my story fits exactly. Something finally fits Sheryl Miller. And so I am authentically, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that story. I'm authentically BIPOC. Okay, next slide. The place of uniqueness, both of my parents give me, I have two parents, two different places, two different races, four different grandparents, four different races, four different places. Okay, and I can only tell you that it's just unique. In the middle on the right this is my visual family tree. And it's important to understand my story because I come to the table of design during the mid-century and civil rights era with all of this really BIPOC baggage. And so I have had to work with it, do my research with it, embrace it. And it's a part of my story that I'm very happy to share. My grandmother and my mother are dead center to the right. And my family is indigenous Danish West Indian. Okay, we now know it as Carnival Cruise, U.S. St. Thomas Virgin Islands. But my grandmother is Danish Creole way before she's Danish, okay, culturally. And the islands are part of the diaspora of the Danish and Ghanaian slave trade. So the primary peoples of the diaspora of the U.S. Virgin Islands is specifically, it's a Mesopotamia of a lot of Caribbean life and travel of centuries, but the core is the relationship between Denmark and Ghana. The Danish slave trade is the diaspora of the islands. And so the woman at the top is my great-grandmother. She's my grandmother's mother. That's my great-grandmother. She's from St. John's, St. John, and is of Ghanaian descent, originally from Tortola. Down at the bottom at the right is in essence, is maybe her second or third nephew. He's Afro-Caribbean, lives in St. Thomas. All my family research, I was able to publish. My story is documented and published. And when you read my article on Thursday, this is some of the dynamic of how I drew conclusions for what I'll be discussing in my article. With that said, we are Danish by territory and Ghanaian by West African diaspora of the slave trade. And all those islands, there are colonizers. There's, the French West Indies, the Dutch French in the West Indies, the British West Indies, and St. Thomas and the three islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Croix, St. John, we are Danish. And again, derivative works of the King of Denmark and the King of Ghana involved in business, slave trade. So my cousin at the bottom is my St. Thomas Afro-Caribbean cousin, and he traveled back. What you're coming up like to the left and then up and around this family tree, he went back and identified, we have a story of oral tradition and factors that I know 1, 2, 3, 4 of my descendant chiefs from Ghana. And he ventured back, and you see him right there with his sunglasses. He's going through a ceremony of being installed. This is really interesting to my whole story, and especially as you read my works and my memoir. What's very, very unique is that these are historical movements of my family. And so I know my 4 original chieftains from Ghana, but you can see that my great-grandmother at the top, she mixed with a Frenchman, French and slash Irishmen. There's a lot of traffic from Europeans, merchants, pirates, all kinds of where the African descent women mixed. And so my grandmother is half Ghanaian descent and culturally Danish and half French. And we're MGMs, multi-generational mix. And history brought my Filipino grandfather to the Danish West Indies. The islands were sold in 1917 to America during World War I. And my grandfather, the history of World War I and purchasing the islands over against a German attempt at the sale. Woodrow Wilson was the president in 1913. We were colonizing the Philippines, and Woodrow Wilson wanted to, he removed and separated the Black service from the armed services, and they replaced all of the cooks, the barbers, the service workers, they replaced with Filipinos. And so when the Americans came March 31st, 1917, it's a really interesting story how my Filipino grandfather came with the US Navy. He was with the Philippine American Navy, and they came in with the executive yachts to establish democracy. My grandmother met him at the USO, and he gave her 3 Filipino babies. And that's why out of this whole family tree, this pictorial family tree, as you can see the circle of events here, my mother clearly looks like a Filipino. Okay. And this is how the genes work. And this is my mom. And what's really interesting with all my archival work and research, when you do family research and history, I've had my DNA done. And what's interesting is the maternal DNA is what is passed. And all of these women in my life, we all have Ghanaian DNA. Okay, so no matter how we mixed, the maternal DNA is being transferred. And so I'm BIPOC maternally by this story, and uniquely, I have all of my Danish records. Our story has been well documented, and it comes to the table of my lectures and my work in very interesting ways. But I'm Ghanaian descent and have Ghanaian DNA, specifically West African DNA from Ghana, from this incredible historical story. And we mixed and matched, and I still carry because I'm a female. Okay, I'm getting my great grandmother's DNA. So we all have our great grandmother's DNA. Okay, and this is mine. Next picture, please. I grew up contextually during the civil rights era. I was born before the civil rights, during the civil rights, after this. I practiced after the civil rights. I attended college touring the day Martin Luther King was assassinated. This is a kind of a composite of some of my influences. Just like our kids are captivated with the iPad, I was captivated by the new media of color television, and Mickey Mouse, and John Nagy. You guys have Bob Ross. Washington, I sat in front of the TV with Mickey Mouse and animation, and John Nagy drawing charcoal pencils. My godmother was a painter, and my father has his own MGM, mixed generational drama from Virginia, and my grandparents are all emancipation derivative works. My grandfather was white American Indian. And these are my father's people right underneath my mother. Okay, my mother came to the States. They met at college. I have one African out of 4 grandparents. I have one African American grandmother, and that's my father's mother. My influences on the right are all of the Colorfield Washington School of Contemporary Art, and I'm in the museum schools. I'm in a museum town, so all the Smithsonian. I grew up at the Portrait Gallery, at the National Gallery of Art. On a good day, you throw the kids on a bus and we take a field trip. So I grew up around a whole lot of art in Washington, D.C. And that's pretty much why I didn't want to study in D.C. I wanted to get out and see some other things. Next slide. The collection starts with just what Michael Grant, who is a scholar, he now works for Google Labs out in California, but at the time he was a scholar, and he was looking for my thesis. Next slide. I am a trade writer. I've had the opportunity to write a lot of articles, be cited in a lot of articles. My work has just transcended my first editor really gave me the best piece of information ever. Okay, and let's go to the next slide. There's a YouTube interview that I had with the Poster House New York, where I describe how I wrote these legacy articles that have just transcended time, and they're legacy pieces. So if you want details about how, not necessarily what, but how I wrote this thesis and how it turned into such a trade legacy voice of advocacy for our industry. It started with this thesis, and there's a long story to it, but this is what Stanford was looking for. This thesis, now I give lectures for capstone and thesis development because I can only say that my thesis has transcended. It's this piece of scholarship that continues to give in my life. And I wouldn't have this presence, and I wouldn't have this collection at Stanford if it hadn't been for this piece of scholarship. So again, we do lectures on capstone and thesis writing. There were some things that I had a great coach to help me. I've had an academic coach. I've had no design mentors, but I had writing coaches along the way. So next slide, please. 1987, it was published, my first major trade article. The thesis was picked up by Print Magazine. I was given an editor and a check, and I've been writing for them ever since. And this is a key stellar piece of trade writing that was definitely taken from the thesis work. So the thesis turned into the 1987 article. Next slide. At the time, and we can go to the next two slides, AIG 1990, AIGA 1991, Carolyn Hightower, Carolyn Hightower was the president of AIGA at the time. The article impacted the industry, and it took flight with the original diversity and design forums for AIGA beginning 1990. You can, all of these things are online, and I have links for them, but the original Black designers, along with AIGA, formulated the first diversity and inclusion task force. And as I can recall, and the covers of these newsletters document John Morning, Michelle Washington, Fo Wilson, Roger Tucker III, and myself as the primary leaders who helped AIGA formulate their first steps, contributions into their legacy work of diversity inclusion. And each one of these newsletters cites my work, my studio, and I had no idea when I wrote that it would take this flight, and it did. So the next slide, please. I wrote again for print, let's write again, in 2016. All of the backstory for the articles, everything, all of the interviews, all the drafts, everything that made the articles and everything that didn't make the articles. There were just boxes of recordings and notes and drafts. What's interesting is that all of the information that was cut from the articles is just as valid. And so, you know, the collection has all of that thought process for these trade writings. And I began writing for other industry magazines. And so I just developed trade writing, and all of my notes, sketches, drafts, notes, interviews, handwritten ideas, all of the backstory for all of my writing. These are the premier pieces, but I wrote other industry articles. I've been writing my whole career with this. Next, please. The collection has the business, the business, not only the portfolio, but a lot of the business documentation for how I ran the business. Next slide, please. So each had, we had an interesting model for business. I had corporate 500 clients and not-for-profit organizations that they sponsored. One led to the other. So I had an interesting model of putting in people of color in corporate communications for major corporations, and then their sponsored organizations like United Negro College Fund and NAACP. They sent me as what they call an in-kind service, and I was sent over to those national organizations to do corporate communications. So one client usually turned to two. All of my ledgers and spreadsheets for all of my clients, I kept, meticulous notes and job jackets, and each job jacket is a course by itself. And so all of my ledgers are in the collection. Next slide, please. I became extremely visible. I've always been visible. Okay, very, very fortunate. This is my first trip to Minneapolis. Okay, great story behind it. This is AIGA Awards, and I was invited to be a judge. So I'm keynoting, I'm judging, I'm writing. I'm and I'm running a firm. But my voice gets big, and I come out to. This is one of my first trips to Minneapolis was just absolutely fabulous. AIGA brought me out, and I was a judge. The picture, the picture at my wrist. I would always visit and give lectures. We're going to see her on Thursday. Carol Porter is she's about the only African American journalist, graphic designer that I know, and so she's been in two of my articles. And this Thursday, there's a section that says, "Where are they now?" And she's retired now from the Washington Post, and we journeyed as women of color through this business. So she is a retired completely journalism designer from the Washington Post. But as you can see, we grew up together, supporting one another, always lecturing and doing portfolio critiques. We've just been raising up and lecturing to the community and coaching Black designers since we got on the path. Next slide. I've had an incredible, I've just had an incredible run of awards, whether it be business awards. I think that's one of the things that has made the firm successful, is that I had a very, very healthy respect for business. It also happened that I married an MBA guy. So corporate business and business management, I had a real good handle on, and I could sell my business, and that's one of the things that was a strength, that I was able to sell. Every day I sold Cheryl Miller Design, and cultivated and created proposals and identified work, which is a whole nother lecture all by itself, how to develop, your firm, which is different than freelancing or getting a job. I created business. All right, next slide, please. It's full of all of my PR photos, so all documentation. I had wonderful corporate photos that photographers just love coming by the studio and saying thank you for jobs. And so some of these iconic photos that you see online of me, my corporate photographers would always come by and say, "Sheryl, can I take your portrait?" as a thank you. So all of my PR portraits, and there's two collections from two main corporate photographers that did all my books. full boxes of 8x10, no contact sheets, 8x10s of photos that I could design my publications with. We're known as publication designers. And so collections within the collection are my corporate photographers. Next slide, please. All other kinds of relationships and sightings. I had a relationship with Roz Goldfarb Associates. We were constantly recruiting, and I'm referring Black designers into New York City with her. And that was an interesting relationship. And so writings about who we're placing into the marketplace, and, you know, graphic design, news trade, they're following me around. Okay, so there's citations and all those notations of what I'm doing, and other people are reporting on me. Okay, so all of those documents are in the archives. Okay, and next slide. And so this is all going on, next slide, and all of it is, these are the main high points of what is in the collection. And I'm saving everything. I get recognized by AIGA. Michelle Washington was kind enough she's a writer as well, and she provided the AIGA design journey profile with AIG. She wrote about me. And so all of these acknowledgements and awards, all of my awards, okay, I've got a lecture on how to win awards. All of this recognition I have saved. Okay, next slide. And it was Michael's request. One more request for that thesis that led Stanford to my basement. Next slide, please. Stanford Libraries, I have no affiliation with them whatsoever. Okay, I didn't buy a wing, like a room, no donations. I didn't graduate from Stanford. They genuinely came, and why they came, I learned, was the work that I was documenting. So when you want research for 5 schools, when you open up the books, I am publishing history, and that was the main attraction. So not only are they design statements, my design thought process, but I'm documenting history during the civil rights era. The people, my clients, my publications, you know, it's just an unbelievable collection of biographies and pictures and stories that I am writing and publishing for my clients. Next slide. So they come and they pick it all up. We can move through it a little bit. She reboxed everything and went through my ledgers. Everything I had was in cardboard boxes and envelopes. And I got a chance, we repackaged in acid-free boxes and archival folders. At the end of, on the 5th morning, the tractor trailer came up to the top of the hill. I live in a cul-de-sac in the woods, and we turned over 50 boxes to Stanford University. Let's look at some of the portfolio pieces that was in the film. This is a NASA commission. We did the first poster for Mae Jemison on her historic flight, and beautiful story, if I have time to go into it. Charles Lilly, who did he's best known for the cover of Malcolm X. He did Mae Jemison's portrait for the poster. And so all of that work, corporate posters, I'm known for corporate posters, but we can advance through the portfolio now. This is an example of all of these pieces have corporate sponsors. So again, this is a Time Inc. sponsored piece for the United Negro College Fund, all right? And all of this, I'm using print production. I'm really leaning into using printing, and there's no technology, no InDesign or anything yet. So this is all old school by hand. And it begins to turn into Macintosh work. And this is an example of a Time Inc. piece where they want to begin to put people of color in their corporate books. This is the acclaimed Gil Ashby, and actually he's teaching out there in the Midwest. I'm not sure which. It's an institute. He's a professor of illustration. I made sure that all of my friends got work. He's a wonderful. You can still Google him and look at this. We could slow it down just a touch. They have, I really used and leaned into printing techniques. So this is gold stamp, emboss, and I'm mastering the grid, and I've got this. The studio has a style, and that's a part of the institutional look that I developed, that we were known for. So people came just not for graphic design, but they came for the look of the studio. So we can advance. I'm a typographer, and so this is old school buying, measuring, figuring out typography, just not throwing it in and skewing it till it fits. Okay, so I'm really designing with the grid and using typography and figuring it out, line space, width, and so forth. You can see a full documentary of this on YouTube, and we can put up a link for that. You can keep scrolling. This is an interesting project for Philip Morris, and we sent a corporate photographer around the world to show their social responsibility. I had to wrestle with, they were a tobacco company, but they do goodwill, and they wanted me to do this book for their social responsibility area, and they gave me an open budget. It says just make us a cocktail table social responsibility book. This is an example of corporate sponsorship communications for the Joint Center, sponsored by IBM. And so this is an example of why she wanted to work. We always did commemorative work. This is 20 years celebration of their participation in, slow down please, with the civil rights movement. And so the books are full of documentation and stories. Okay, next slide. And we can advance through it. Yeah, we just had a look, and we're capturing history is what's happening. We can move through. And the work, we have a style for this institutional look. And these books are used for getting grants, support, sponsorship, and they all came with a corporate sponsor paying for the corporate communications. So on one hand, I'm doing work for the corporation, and then I'm doing work for who they're sponsoring. So the national organizations, they have corporate money to do these publications. And I was the lady that was making all these books. Okay. And yeah, so you can just advance through it. You'll often hear, this is a transitional piece. We're now into digital work. And this is annual report. BET moves from, slow down please. BET moves from being private to public, and this is their first annual report in New York City. And it's completely digital, and we're now advancing from old school craftsmanship to the Macintosh. So all of this, these are all award-winning pieces, one way or the other. Okay, next. This is interesting. We became known as advertorial designers. You can advance a couple of. Keep going. Okay, you pause here. Advertorials are inserts. This is a advertorial paid for by McDonald's, and advertorial is sponsored content that fits within the context of a magazine. This is YSB, it's a hip hop magazine. Fo Wilson is the art director. And my assignment for McDonald's was to do a content piece that inserts into the magazine And that's why it's called an advertorial. You know, we're not the sponsor. It's an ad, but it's a content ad. It's not an ad for hamburgers and French fries and so forth. So we had several magazine companies that we did this concept, of advertorial, which is content that sits within a magazine, and it has to feel and look like the magazine, but it's sponsored by an organization. Okay, next, please. We did a wonderful series of work, again, sponsored by a major corporation for the Congressional Black Caucus. So we did special event posters. I'm known as a corporate poster designer. Our posters are in 3 museums: The Hague in the Netherlands, the Poster House, New York City, and Stanford. All of my corporate posters are collected in museums. You can advance through it. You can keep going. Charles Lilly, long story. We don't have the time for storytelling, but he did the portrait, the well-known portrait of Malcolm X on the cover of Ballantine Books, autobiography of Malcolm X, and I asked him, would he do this NASA commission for me? So you can't buy these; they weren't for sale. NASA said deliver 1,000 to Cape Canaveral, and so we have this historic poster, and it's collected in 3 places now. This is one that's inspired. I had a staff, but I stopped everything to do this poster myself. It's inspired by Aaron Douglas imagery, award-winning 1991 Congressional Black Caucus. It's behind me in my little island nook here for Zoom. And I have a vintage collection of these. All of these posters, I still have pieces, and you can get this poster online. That was one of the things that was very precious, was to get portfolio pieces for all of my staff. So a part of the collection, I had a minimum of 250 to 1,000 of samples over the order for my clients. And, being a firm of color and having, I had kids and students from all kinds of backgrounds, and I just wanted to make sure they had portfolio pieces for the next job. So samples was a big thing. I gave them out. I used them for sale, but more importantly, it was my heart to make sure that everybody had samples for their portfolio, because it was hard for us to get, the work. And so I knew I had work. And so at the end of the day, I ended up with slats and boxes of all of this work. Okay. Thus the collections and things going in to the museums. These pieces were done by Chase Manhattan. You can go through it. Yvonne Buchanan she's the illustrator for this series of 5 posters for Chase Manhattan, who had a relationship they wanted to show with their community initiatives in Harlem. And Yvonne is a tenured professor at Syracuse University now. So all of my collaborators and everybody is still, at their level and their expertise. Everyone is still functioning, okay? And everybody I write about hung in there, and we're still practicing one way or the other in different ways. Next, all of my, all of my letter forms and branding, BET, you'll read, my story about doing some of the primary television graphics for BET. So all of my sketches, thought process, letter forms, and the next slide. And, just unbelievable sketches. The next one. All of this is done without, all of these logos are mined by hand, no Adobe Illustrator, okay? And I was a broadcast designer for many years before coming into New York and doing publications. So branding for television stations and television shows and things was a part of what I did. And so I was fortunate enough to win and be recognized as a broadcast designer. So I have all those little statues and things. They're broadcast designers, okay? And so, Yeah, and what's interesting that all of this is crafted old school by hand, no Adobe. Next slide. My office had full of things that, you know, reflected my family life. And so people are always interested, do you have a family, and this, that, and the other. And so all of my things that were in my office that reflected, I got a Ken and Barbie story. I married the pastor's son. We were high school sweethearts, and I've been with him, okay? And it was his career that brought us to New York. He graduated from business school, and his corporation said, you want to move to New York? And I'm like, oh my God. I left mom and brother and dog and house, and I followed, you know, this is old school, girls, ladies. I followed my man to New York, okay? And it's a pretty wholesome Barbie and Ken story. I married the pastor's son. What can I say? It worked out. It worked out, guys. It worked out. Okay. And that's important because women in design now, people ask me about that. And, you know, there's so many definitions of family and relationships. It's, you know, it's a valid expression in a genre, period, you know, and I'm now interviewed about women and, you know, tell us about your family. So what was in my office that I collected of my family, you know, it's in the boxes. Cheryl, did you have family? I'm like, yeah. And he's been with me. He bought me my first drafting table, you know, moved me into Baltimore when my father passed away, bought me my first drafting table. He's been my rock in a weary land with art, okay? And then the next slide.
Oh, Sheryl, I just wanted to let you know we have a little less than 5 minutes before we can go into the Q&A.
Okay, so, and this is the end. We are at the end. I am a woman of strength and faith, and there are a lot of affirmations. I write to myself. I talk to myself. Cheryl Waldron came by the office and she said, Cheryl, let's write a prayer about how hard this is. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So, you know, I have all of these little things that cheered me on in my journals. That's in the survey. And we can close out. Here, I'm going to give you my tips to all of this in the next few slides. Here are my basic secrets to how all of this happened for me. First off, I am the first. I claim the first in certain things, okay? Like first brand name recognition, Coca-Cola, and then comes Pepsi-Cola. You know, you go to FedEx and you say, can I have a Xerox, please? And Xerox copies, and in the back, they're Canon copies, you know, copy machines back there. You know, I have some first name recognition with it. I found a niche, and I knew that I had a solution to a problem that I saw. If you can see a problem and you know you have the gift to solve it, you're the one that's got to go out there and say, you know, you got an issue, I can solve it. So I filled a void. So if you can kind of get those things, the first one out, find a niche and be the solution and begin to pitch and brand and market and sell, you know, you should be able to put together a good firm. Next slide. I knew business. Okay, so I knew how to sell. I had a, you know, in an extended lecture, I have business documents that I share, shows my entire platform from the business plan to papers of incorporation, contracts, invoices. I learned to create profit in the design business because I ran a business in New York City. I had people working for me. No one could live on freelance money. So I had to learn the graphic design firm business. So I knew business. And I have a motto: living your life for yourself is your story. Living your life for others is your legacy. Leave a legacy. And that's what I've done. I've integrated my work. I've been coaching designers since 1974. I keep up with everybody. I talk to everybody. I come, it doesn't really matter, you know, big or small. I share this story to inspire. And I definitely, I started a long time ago. I definitely have left a legacy for design scholars of tomorrow. I have a wonderful body of work and writing and scholarship that will help generations to come. And I live my story. but I also lived my legacy. And with that said, the next two slides, it's all at Stanford. They came and got it all. And I shout out to Regina, is the key curator and collections librarian at Stanford. And she just wanted it. She wanted to decolonize the library collections from just being white Euro-centric practitioners. And she came, it was an honor. Next slide. 50 boxes, 50 years, left my hands, but not my life, and definitely into your life. And last slide, that's the Sheryl Miller collection at Stanford. And I do other lectures and things with Zoom in, but this is the entire survey of what's there and what I have left for researchers. So with that, Terry, if you want to start questions, and it's been a pleasure. I'm here till I'm not. So
Thank you so much, Cheryl. That was 50 years in the making, come together in 1 hour. All right. Very nice. All right, we've got some thank yous. I had a question when you were talking about, you were saying that design was the least of your contributions that made you who you are. And you said your studies in theology actually really shaped that.
Yeah, it shaped the scholarship, because the school that I went to it's not Bible college. And so where you walk out with the primary degree for licensing, to be a pastor, they pride themselves on critical thinking and documentation and history and scholarship. And this is the school where Cornel West, Dolores Williams, Katie Cannon, Jacqueline Grant, George Washington, James Cone, we study those works of liberation theology, and systematic theology is the reshaping and reframing of ethos when systems fail and systems become tight for humanity. You do a work. So all that critical thinking and being able to document scholarship and to try to correct the wrongs, liberation theology, and those studies, it's not Bible college, all right? And so learning those tools to be critical thinking towards scholarship is what I learned on top of design process thinking. So I'm a thinker and a writer. Okay. And even the way I solve design problems are, I'm very detailed, and I have design thought process. So all of it is the composition of my work. I mean, I'm a writer and a designer of equal measure. And that gives an advantage. So if you can write and you have a voice and you have solid design thinking and process skills through application, you're playing a piano right hand and left hand. You can play a song. And so I was able to master I always say I professionalized occupation and vocation. And this is what we have.
And so do you have any thoughts about what's going on right now? Because I know this has been going on for you for most of your life, but now it's kind of, for me, it feels like it's coming to
it's coming to an end by Thursday, trust me. It's coming to an end. But what has happened now that I'm excited about is we're in a season of reparation. And this happened in the civil rights movement too. And this happened through eras of abolition, okay? Allies, and there are people out there protesting now for all of the issues of unrest that America is facing. Everybody is out in the streets. And protest as a design has picked up an incredible ally community. And so the thrust to decolonize design education, to broaden our thinking, to make the seat at the table, put more seats at the table of this discussion than our Eurocentric perspective to North American design education that is prevalent through all the art schools. What's happening is there's a demand, the young scholars are demanding tolerance of the industry and academia, and they're moving the needle. And it's a valid protest demand. So design has found a way to protest, and there is an incredible ally movement of people who are supporting to make sure that everybody, no matter, I mean, it's so everybody, whosoever, wheresoever, is so broad now. But the movement is toward an ally community that is pushing the envelope and moving the meter of tolerance to make sure everybody, race, gender, you name it, you got a seat, you're gonna sit down, and if you're a practitioner in excellence and you can perform, then there's not only diversity and there's not only equality, but there's equity. And so I think that design as protest, there are a lot of people who have come together to push this forward for everybody. Yeah, that's what's going on.
So you think it's the allied help that's like
Yes.
making the difference in the change?
Yeah.
More people who are not BIPOC are actually contributing and participating.
Yes, and those are issues also with you know, gender and race. The complexity of the practitioner is broad, and so the demand for diversity as we define it in its uniqueness, 21st century living, you know, diversity is just not race, okay? It's gender, all right? And so equal space and equity for everyone, and a tolerance and an unconditional sitting at the table. And a lot of the thrust is coming from the students. Okay, the movement is really coming from the students, and they're you know, they're demanding, and what's happening in their protests, leadership is coming to the table to move the needle. And so I'm very hopeful that in this season of reparation, there will be change and growth. It's absolutely time. There's no way that I should be working on something for 50 years and it's in the same place. That makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
There's a question here from Ellen Mueller, who teaches our director of our MFA program here at MCAD. And she asked, what tips do you recommend to students seeking to strengthen their writing skills?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
More of it.
Right. And find ways to publish. And when you can't find ways to publish, create the way to publish. So, you know, your school newsletters, Medium, creating your blogs, creating your audience, your Facebook groups, your LinkedIn groups. You know, everybody's got writing that's attached. And when you have, when you gather enough audience, and again, I wrote advocacy. And when you have a purpose, and the reason that my writing has withstood the bullets, okay, is that my work is based on scholarship and statistics. So let's just take these 4 that will be published, the trilogy of 4 parts. Last week was real gritty. I mean, I started off slow. And last week's I talked about the student protest in academia, all right? And I focused on Rhode Island School of Design. I have documented Rhode Island School of Design since my thesis. So it was nothing for me to find out where they were after writing in 1985 about them, 1987, 2016. And they have one of the most organized student protests I have ever seen. Okay, these young scholars, they need to be at Occidental or Stanford. I don't know even why they're in art school. It was so sophisticated. But the respect of the article is just not on a hissy fit. Okay, it's lined, it's laced with statistics. All right. My assertions on Thursday, okay, my assertions on Thursday, I present 4 footnotes. Okay, I'm going to really reveal some groundbreaking information on Thursday, which brings closure for me, ends my conversation about the Black designer specifically that I've been writing and living and advocating for 50 years. 4 footnotes are at the end, about 4 footnotes are at the end of the article. Behind those 4 footnotes, they give you my assertion, okay? There's a stack. This is, I guess, my upcoming book. In other words, so this is the stack of just footnotes, archival records that make Thursday's article. You hear that from me. So when you read it and you say, oh my God, I can't believe she wrote that. And the editor Friday said, Cheryl, give me the footnote. I went and found the archive and sent JPEGs. In other words, we have to cite this content exactly. All right. So my work is fact checked. All right. And it's solid as a rock. So I sent him photo screenshots of where I got access to academic archives for the footnotes for what I contend on Thursday's article. Yesterday, as a fact check, he said, can you send me the link again? I want to make sure I cite it exactly. Now, I just gave it to him on Friday. All right. And so I painstakingly did what the editor said. I had record on record on what I'm saying on Thursday is backed by a stack of footnotes. I'm only featuring 4, and the editor asked me twice in the last 72 hours to prove what I'm saying. Okay, and so when you write, what moves, these articles are documented, and I'm documenting facts, footnotes, history, and when you write, you got to write like that. So I just can't have a voice. Well, I feel like, yeah, you feel like, and who are you? So you feel like. So all of my writings are substantiated, and that's some of the skill base that I learned in theology. The skill base is what is like when you see you and I, we're here at this lecture. When you read Thursday, you believe every word.
Yeah.
You believe every word, and you would have seen all of the back. And when I'm gone, my kids know that my next boxes and things, send it to Stanford. Okay, so so when you see my stuff online, this is being prepared. Okay, plus all of the research is a box all for this trilogy. And so my kids know, and probably, after the article dies down a little bit, I will send the box for this third 4-part series. I will send the research, okay, for this article. And so I'm an archivist to my own collection. And when you read the article on Thursday, you see that I've opened up with my colleagues. We've opened up the history of Black graphic design at Stanford. We're putting together all of our findings so that there's an open source academic collection of information for scholars to begin writing a history that needs to be written. Okay, the reason that I felt this was important is that you can't Google our history. It's in oral tradition, it's in card catalogs, and a lot of stuff needs to be pulled out. And I had an entree with Stanford, so they have organized with us, and we have a collection that's being curated now, the history of Black graphic design. So, you know, I'm serious about leaving this information so the scholars can write.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's a gift of knowledge that will last hundreds, hopefully thousands of years. That's that legacy. And we had a question related to this. I just want to make sure these questions are. Someone asked here that, you know, I wonder, is there a tension perhaps between like what's taught at art schools? Is there a tension between studio programs, like maybe what you experienced at Pratt, and this more analytical process of writing that you're describing, this kind of deep research and this historical knowledge that you're unearthing and cataloging? And is that more often housed in more of a liberal arts kind of curriculum? And how do you kind of broach that, or where do students find?
I can't answer that necessarily. I can tell you what happened to me. That when I went to Pratt, I mentioned that my husband had finished grad school and brought us into New York, and I had 10 years of broadcast experience. And so I had my portfolio reviewed for the program at Pratt grad school. And they gave me half of the degree based on my professional portfolio. And my presence, just my awards, and, you know, 10 years of professional experience, they gave me half and told me study and pay the tuition. So I got out of that program in a year and a half. When I got to the year and a half, which you'll hear me say over and over again, the school would not let me do a design project for my thesis. I said, okay. They're like, okay, I'm going to design school. Okay, and you won't let me do a design project to get out. And it was kind of like, I don't know what they said to anybody else, but this is what they said to me. Sheryl Miller, this will be too easy for you. You know, we gave you a break getting into this program. Okay, you studied, you paid the bill, you've done it in half the time. You're not getting out of here this easy. So I was given a challenge, no design project. And then Eitan Manasseh, who was the chair, you hear me say it all the time, he says, I want you, Sheryl Miller, to make a contribution to the industry. I said, do what? He said, make a contribution to the industry. I can see his face. You know, I'm in the loft, his design loft in Lincoln Center. And I'm like, okay, I've gone through the project. I've gone through the process, the program. I'm ready to graduate. Can I do a design project? Let me do environmental design, branding, something or the other. He said, no. And I said, okay. So I was given a challenge. And the challenge was, you can't get out with a design project. So I got cross readers. I got one of the strongest academic coaches. She's been my academic coach for 50 years. You heard me say that, you know, my father died. I ended up at MICA. Well, day one, I met the now acclaimed Dr. Leslie King Hammond, and she was the first African history teacher at MICA in 1971. And we were like the only women of color, and I just lost my dad, and they like, Leslie, Dr. King, take care of this poor little child. She's supposed to be in Providence, ended up in Baltimore, her father died, and she's here, she's yours. And Dr. King now, she's acclaimed, you can Google her. She's been my academic coach. When I didn't have a design coach, a mentor, she's been my academic mentor. I've had writing, academic, scholarship writing editors. I've had people to come to push me to excellence as a writer. And sometimes I have to scratch my head, because when I talk about a season of reparation after civil rights, and I often tell you that I started college touring the day Martin Luther King passed away, all the Ivy League schools and schools, everybody opened up. I had invitation to study at Wellesley. I could have gone to school with Hillary Clinton. I had Wellesley in one hand and RISD in the other. But if I had gone off, you know, I searched myself. If I had gone off to study English Lit, to be a writer, at Wellesley, it probably wouldn't have happened. Okay, so I got what I needed. I got good editors. I got followed breadcrumbs. I had coaches. And the drama in the design industry gave me something to write about. Okay, a writer with nothing to write about. So that's what happened with me, that I had a right hand and a left hand, and I was called to perform. So the writing is where I got the support. Great editors. My academic coach, 50 years, she is a scholar of African history. Dr. Leslie King Hammond, but she was just a professor when I met her. And I called her up. I said, Dr. Hammond, Pratt's not letting me out of here. And so she pushed me. She said, Sheryl, you got to do this, and the other. Okay. And we put together this thesis capstone project that had really, it was all scholarship and cross-referencing. And, you know, I solved a problem. And that piece of scholarship is transcended. And that's where, plus I was experiencing the disenfranchisement. You know, I'm a New York designer, and it wasn't easy. So my story of the difficulty and the things that we were facing, you know, I'm not above the problem at all. So I lived the problem. I had friends who were suffering by the problem. At least I had an education. So where I got help and support and coaching and mentoring as a writer, I was alone as a designer, and that's what gave me something to write about. It's been an arduous journey. So other than being intentional and writing and finding advocacy, I don't know any design program that puts the two together. It was my life, my call. And I've had a chance to really think about this. When my kids were going to college, I've been on college campuses from Maine to Virginia on the East Coast, from the Atlantic 95 into 287 in west into Pennsylvania, all the schools that you could go in college touring for my adult kids, you know. And I sat there listening to information sessions, and I had a chance to think, did I do the right thing? Okay, did I study the right thing? And the kids are going back to school. Do I want to reinvent my wheel? And after two kids on, I have student athlete scholars. So I'm on the D1 track. I'm on the Ivy track. I'm visiting all of these schools. Women, my daughter, I'm going through all of the women's colleges. I mean, the best colleges on the East Coast. I'm in information sessions. And not only am I listening, well, what's your first choice? What's early decision? What are the rules? What are this, that, and the other? I'm sitting there in my heart. Okay, did I do the right thing? And I came out with, Sheryl, you didn't have any choice, because if you were going to do it again, you'd do the same thing all over again. So that's how I know that I was called. You know, I was called to do this, to live it, to journey it, everything that I've needed to be a part of this. I think my life's assignment was not only to do this art and to do this documentation of the civil rights era, but to correct some of the injustice. And when you see Thursday's article, I tell you exactly the injustice, exactly. And that article for me, it brings me closure. I had no idea that when I set out in this pandemic to write one more time like this, that I would find the end of this story for you. So if you don't read anything else, read Thursday and believe it, because you and I have been here together for 2 hours. I lived to tell you the story on Thursday. And that'll be the end of it for me. And hopefully a new beginning for everybody who will take my writing seriously and know this time together, the 4 footnotes you see, okay, it's backed by a stack of footnotes on my sofa here and on my floor. So I'm hoping that and at this point, I'm looking for invitations. I don't want, BIPOC life is rough. You don't break down doors that won't open. You don't crack windows that are sealed. There are wide open opportunities for people who want me to help, okay? And I believe that I will be writing more, okay? The history books need new insertions. So new editions, I want to help write. Prefaces to your books, you know, I will write. The back paragraphs to your book, I will write. New history books. Cheryl, would you write insertions? So I'm not talking about undoing our history books in our canon. That's not what I'm about. I'm a fabulous designer because I embrace the canon. I've lived 2/3 of Bauhaus. Bauhaus is 101 years old. I'm a baby boomer. I've lived through 2/3 of it. Okay. The problem I have is won't let anybody else in our thinking and our learning. Okay. And there's a whole incredible story of North American designers that make up our history. So the writing is just, I can't answer how you can do that. I can only tell you that I was made for this. And breadcrumbs came to help me put it all together. And now the rest of my time is to inspire you guys, okay, to do the work. I did the work. So if you see anything of Sheryl Miller, you and I spent the time here. I did the work. I want you to do the work. You got to do the work. There's no, you know, and when you are of color, there's no favor. I didn't have any, I told you Stanford, I didn't pay for a building so that it would come. I did the work. I did the work. And so you've got to do the work. And that's it. It's just plain old excellence. You got to do the work and believe, because there isn't a whole lot of favor. There isn't a whole lot of warm fuzzy. You have to be undeniable. And so when I get invited, it's solid. It's solid. And my word of mouth. Yeah, you want Sheryl Miller's lectures. You want Sheryl Miller to teach a class, okay? You want Sheryl Miller to write your preface. You want, okay, and that's all you have is your word of mouth and your excellence. And so you gotta believe in that goodwill, and nothing can undo that. You know, the worst critics can't undo good design in your life and a life well designed. It's impossible. So, guys, we gotta do the work.
Thank you so much.
I don't mind taking another question, okay? If there's another good one that you want, you know.
I think that's all the time we have for today. But what an amazing life. What an amazing legacy. I'm so thrilled to have had you here and share your experiences and your advice. It's so pivotal. The timing couldn't have been any better. I can't wait to read Thursday. And in case you guys haven't read any of her other, I'm going to share those links that we have for part 1, 2, and 3 that's already been published by Print Magazine here.
Yeah, and my YouTube, I make sure I leave everything for you. Everything that I leave online is a how-to. I don't do a whole lot of look at me. I want to show you how to do it so you can do it too, and do it better. Do it better. There's opportunity. There's a wide world. Okay, if I could do this against all of these odds, all right, and all of these crazy family people, look at that mixed up thing. I can do it. And then all of that, I got called a Black woman, okay? If I can do it that's why the name of this lecture is Designing in the Dark. If I can do this with every obstacle against me, this is 21st century, guys. Mm-hmm. 21st century. Just purpose in your mind to make a difference. Design a life, have a life well designed. Design is just not your project. Have a life well designed. Okay, and that's and live your legacy. Live it out. And that's the only thing I can do, is to tell you that if I could do this lecture is Designing in the Dark, Lord have mercy, if I could do this in the dark, what you can do in the light. Yeah, I have an expectation for you guys. I really, really do. And there isn't anything online. I tell you how to do everything. If you go to my YouTube, you'll see the documentary, you'll see the full survey of all of my work. You'll see interviews about how I wrote the article. I leave how to every place I go. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Everybody finds me on LinkedIn. Okay, so you can find me on LinkedIn. Unless I get a ceiling on users, everybody, I'm there because I didn't have anybody. I didn't have a soul. And so that's why I make myself accessible. I don't want you to be alone with it. Really. It's not what you want to do. Do this alone.
Well, thank you so much.
Even if I don't have an answer, I say I'm with you. I'm with you. Keep going. That's my, keep going. So find me on LinkedIn, guys, okay? Or Instagram. And especially Thursday, you all hit me up. What do you think? What do you think?
I can't wait to read it. Thank you for paving the way for us.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. Listen, wear your mask, be safe. Find me on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I thank you so much for having me. And trust me, I'll stop for you. If you can, if your green light, this is my policy. If your green light is on and my green light is on, I'm gonna do it now, lady. I said, here, look, talk to me right now. I might not have tomorrow for an appointment. If I see your light is on, we talk. All right, ciao, ciao, people. Be safe, okay?
Lots of thank yous.
Thank you. All right, God bless.
God bless.